Hello everyone and welcome back to the Balanced Student Podcast, or welcome to my YouTube channel because I'm going to be uploading this episode onto YouTube as well. So if you're watching on YouTube, hello, it's great to see you. Welcome to my channel. My name is Aria and today I'm going to share with you guys how I scored in the top 1% of students in the country. So I'm going to start by sharing my personal journey all throughout my schooling, and throughout that every few minutes I'm going to share some of the tips that I use which you guys can apply to your own study life to hopefully improve your grades. Now all these tips and tricks that I share with you guys not only helped me to graduate in the top 1% of students, but also helped me to achieve a lot of other things that I've done in my life. So a lot of these tips are things that you can carry into your work life or your other goals and ambitions, things like that. So they're what separate the majority of people from the top 1% and how you can be in that top 1% in your own life. So if you've ever wondered how some students consistently excel and somehow manage to stay on top of things, I'm going to give you the step-by-step blueprint on how to get there. But before we get into all of that, I would really appreciate if you guys could give this podcast a rating on Spotify. It takes literally 5 seconds of your time and it means so much to me, and it helps this podcast get reached to more students so we can help even more people. And if you're on YouTube, do all of the YouTube things, like and subscribe, etc. That would mean so much to me. It would genuinely make my day, so thank you. Okay, so getting into my story through school. So I do recognise I'm incredibly fortunate to have attended private schooling for my whole schooling, and it was at the same school. So I wasn't changing around schools. I was at the one school for my whole schooling, and I do realise how fortunate I am to have gone to a private school, and I know a lot of people don't have that opportunity, and I'm incredibly grateful every single day to have had that experience. Because at my school I had so many great teachers who really supported me and really nurtured what I recognised to be a love of learning. I was always so curious about how things worked, how things interacted, and what my role was in making the world a better place. And I'm so grateful that I had so many teachers that recognized that and saw that and challenged me to work my best. Anyways, in the junior school I was usually scoring like B's and A's, so I was a pretty good student. There was nothing wrong there, but I also had no idea what grades were and I didn't really care. And this isn't a bad thing, especially at that age. For most of us, our grades don't matter. And the thing is, your grades don't matter at that age, but the mindsets and the skills that you're developing, they do matter. And this leads us into tip 1, which is to challenge yourself like a top 1% student and have the mindset of a top 1% student from the very beginning. Except for in a few very rare cases, most top students are actually built like a decade in advance. And this doesn't just mean in terms of their grades. Because you see, being a top student doesn't just depend on what study methods you use, which yes, that is important and we will get into that later, but there is a lot more mindset and physical behaviors that play into it. It really involves so much more, like from the way you act, the way you think, and all of this I was kind of subconsciously doing since I was like 10 years old. The thing is, I would always try my best at everything. I would always challenge myself to do something harder. Like at that age, it wasn't even anything serious. Like if I wanted to build a sandcastle, I just wanted it to be the best sandcastle that it could be. If I climbed a tree, I wanted to climb to the highest branch. And I was very lucky to have parents and teachers that encouraged me to pursue a lot of extracurriculars. So I did every team sport available, which by the way, guys, I do not like team sports. Like that was definitely not something that I excelled at, but I am grateful to my parents for putting me in those sports because whilst I really didn't enjoy it, it did teach me the perseverance, resilience, team building, everything that I still carry today. But anyways, I learned very early on that I am capable of doing hard things and that if I push myself and I challenge myself at something, then I can improve. And this is the exact self-belief that eventually 10 years down the line creates top students. Because top students aren't the ones that always just take the easy option. They don't do the easy questions and then close their textbook and call it a day. No, they give themselves the challenging questions. They take the challenging worksheets. They push themselves to write an essay that was better than the essay that they wrote last time. And all of that comes from the belief that you can do hard things and you can improve if you put in effort. And that self-challenging doesn't happen without some kind of belief that you are worth that challenge. So I want you to say to yourself right now, I am worth getting good grades. I am worth putting in the effort for myself to improve academically and in other areas of your life. But this mindset doesn't develop overnight. And don't worry, you don't need to have started a decade ago. Please do not get that misconception. But as soon as possible, start repeating to yourself, I can do hard things. If I put my mind to something, then I can improve at it. Because especially when you're young, your grades don't matter, but your study habits and your way of thinking, that is really what matters. So I encourage you from now on to make a deliberate effort to choose the harder option. When the rest of your classmates are doing the easy questions, skip ahead and do the harder ones. When the rest of your class is sitting out in PE because they don't feel like running, do the running. It's all of those times where you choose the hard option that you train yourself to have the discipline to always do the harder thing, push yourself and improve. And that is what will prepare you to become a top 1% student in the future. Anyway, so back to my story. In middle school, I sort of decided that nothing less than perfect was worth it. I remember in year 10, I had this math test, which I was so stressed about and I had studied so much for. And my teacher handed me back the result and I got a 97%. And I was like almost in tears. Like I was so dead set on getting 100% for every single test. And when I got anything that was slightly less than 100, I was like, oh my God, I have lost my winning streak. I am a terrible student, all of that. And my poor teacher, she was an amazing human being. And she actually like pulled me aside and she spent the whole of lunch break talking to me saying, Aria, you're doing incredibly well. Don't let perfectionism hold you back. Because genuinely the thing that I struggled with most was overworking myself and perfectionism. And we will get into that soon. But I pretty much studied like my life depended on it from then on. I remember year 10 and 11 were the most academically intense years, not just because of the workload, but because of that pressure that I had on myself. I felt like, yes, I had a lot of work to do, but I also wanted to make it the best it could be. And I know I was saying before about, pushing yourself and choosing the harder option, but this was beyond that. This was making sure that I had done every single question and just everything that I could possibly milk out of the syllabus. And it was literally at the detriment of my health. Anyways, I know some schools have a ranking per year, like you can be like the top student or the 10th student. We didn't have that at my school per se, but we did have a bunch of academic awards that you could win at the end of the year. And I remember I pretty much had a streak of academic commendations, which I think is like when you get all A's and like maybe 1B, although I think the majority of my cohort got these anyway. It wasn't really anything too special. I don't want to disregard anyone that got them, but it was quite easy to, a lot of people got them. There were also like a highest achievement for a subject award, which I think I got one for like agriculture, which was really weird because I have nothing to do with agriculture. I don't know what was going on there. And then I think dance, nutrition, maybe French at some point. I can't really remember those, but those were like slightly more cool and important. There was this really cool maths award though. I think it was in year 10, which is the same year that I cried about the maths test, but there was this maths achievement award, which I ended up getting, which I was quite proud of because it was only one student for the whole year. And I honestly didn't even think that I was that good at maths, and I thought that other people were so much better than me and should have gotten the award, but I am proud of that. Anyways, from like year 9 onwards, I was dead set on getting valedictorian. I think in Australia we call it DUCS, which is a really weird word, but it's the same thing as valedictorian if you're in America or the UK or whatever you guys call it. So in year 11, I worked pretty much 24/7 because I knew how disappointed I would be if I didn't get it. So in year 10 to 12, I did get pretty much A+ in every subject. And whilst I by no means encourage this kind of obsession that I had towards my studies during these years, and if you follow me on Instagram, you can see why I don't endorse that, it definitely did play a role in the final score I ended up getting. And the reason for this leads into the next tip. And that is that effective studying is hard. I see so many videos of people saying like how to get straight A's effortlessly, or, playing studying off as something that is just really easy for top students. But please, 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 please understand that this is not the case. You know the phrase study smarter, not harder? Unfortunately, I have to disagree with this because studying smarter kind of is studying harder. So let me explain. There is 2 types of studying. If you watch any study videos, you probably already know this, but you've got passive learning and active recall. I will elaborate more on these later, but basically passive learning feels easy, it takes ages, and it sort of gives you the illusion of productivity because you've got this whole page of notes written and you're like, oh my God, I've done so much work, I'm so productive. But you're not actually going to remember any of that, and you have this really false sense of like feeling accomplished on top of things. But active recall, on the other hand, feels so much harder. It doesn't take as long, but it is so much more effective. So you might have done a few practice questions, but they were so hard and so intense, and you're going to remember everything you learned so much better than if you'd written like 10 pages of notes on it. And it is precisely because it's difficult that makes it so effective. Because the more of your brain that is involved with something, the better you will learn it and remember it. Whereas when you're doing passive learning, the only part of your brain that's really involved in it is the occipital cortex, which is the bit that you see, or if you're saying something, it's the temporal lobe. Whereas active recall actually involves the hippocampus, which is where your memories are stored. And it also involves a lot of other brain regions. So the rundown is, if your studying feels easy, then I hate to break it to you, but it probably isn't working, or if it is, it just isn't the most effective use of your time. So if you're just reading of your notes before a test going like, oh yeah, I know that, then you're really not challenging yourself and you're not improving, because it's that very recall of like, what was the name of the temporal lobe, what's the function of the temporal lobe, as I just tried to remember, that is going to strengthen those pathways so that when on the test you get asked, what does the temporal lobe do? You actually know, because if you're just reading of your notes, you're just putting the information in and you're not practicing it, getting it out. I have done a whole lot of episodes on active recall, so please watch those if you haven't watch those. I don't think they're on YouTube yet, but on my podcast on Spotify, listen to them because that will really help you. But yeah, all in all, top students don't find studying easy. They deliberately make it hard for themselves so that when the test comes, the test feels easy. It's either you choose easy now and the test is hard, or you choose to study hard now and the test feels easy. It is up to you. Okay, so back to my story. In Australia, I'm gonna have to read off this because it's a lot. In Australia, the way our scores work is we get an ATAR, which is pretty much scaled average of your top 4.5 stage 2 subjects. Stage 2 subjects, by the way, are like year 12 equivalent subjects. And the maximum ATAR you can get is 99.95. If you want to learn more about that, please Google it because I honestly don't completely understand it either. But basically in Australia, we take fewer subjects each year. So in year 10, I took 12 subjects. In year 11, I took 6 subjects. And then in year 12, I took 3 subjects. Obviously, though, the workload per subject does increase each year. So my workload was more or less the same across the 3 years, even though I had fewer subjects. And by the way, the only reason I could take 3 subjects in year 12 was because I did 3 stage 2 year 12 equivalent subjects in year 11. So in year 11, I had 3 stage 2s and 3 stage 1s, which are year 11 equivalents. And so you only need, I think, 5 stage 2 subjects. And I'd already done 3 in year 11. So I could have gotten away with doing 2 in year 12, but I didn't do that. I took 3 in year 12, although I think the maximum we were allowed to take was 5. But yeah, so I did have a lower workload than other year 12s in year 12. In year 11, I received my first taste of actual perfection, and I got straight 100% for an entire subject, which was nutrition, for the entire year. Like literally every test was 100%. Every assignment I got A+, like A+ for all the different categories, and it was all A+. And I didn't even think that was possible, and I remember seeing them come back and I was like, whoa, like is this even happening? And honestly, I was so convinced I was going to merit for the subject, which if you guys don't know, like a merit is when you're in like I think the top 1% grade for the subject, because I was like, I'm literally getting 100%, like how can you actually get better than this? Like I'm definitely going to get a merit. But because of scaling, etc., I didn't end up meriting it. I think it's because I got an A on the exam, or like it's like a scaled A. But anyways, I didn't end up meriting the subject, but I did merit research project, which is a different subject that I felt like I hardly even tried in. So it's really weird how scaling works, and if your school does that, please don't place your worth on it because it's so weird. And yeah, so yeah, don't ask me, I have no idea how to calculate it, but it was a bit frustrating. But the approach that I used for this one particular subject leads me into the next tip, which is to use study methods that work and leave those that don't. So in middle school, I used to come home from school every single day and rewrite all of my notes. Like I would literally sit at my desk for like 2 to 3 hours and just rewrite everything. And I was convinced that that was the key to academic success. I was like, if I just rewrite it one more time, that'll imprint it into my brain and I will remember it perfectly. However, as I alluded to before, this is a form of passive learning and my brain really wasn't even thinking about what I was writing. I would have been much better off using those 2 to 3 hours to either have some free time or do study methods that actually worked. So for example, in nutrition, when I took that class, I made a lot of flashcards. I think I ended up with about 2,000 flashcards over the course of the year, but because I used spaced repetition, I didn't have to do all of these flashcards every day, thank God. But I did maybe like 120-ish a day for that subject. Yeah. These two methods are pretty well known nowadays, but over the years I have done a lot of experimenting with all of the different techniques, and I actually compiled the best ones into my guide, Secrets of Highly Effective Students, which I have linked in the description if you guys want to buy it. It goes into depth about all of the methods that I personally used throughout my schooling to get straight 100% in that subject, and I still use them today to get high distinctions as a medical science student, because you cannot expect to be in the top 1% of students if you're not using the best possible study methods, and I can pretty much guarantee you're not going to get there with just passive learning. But that is only a small part of the story, so let me continue. So in terms of actually getting these scores that led me to get the ATAR I did, I knew I had to choose really carefully, because basically at our school, I don't know if your school does this, but we have subjects that scale higher. So typically a subject that is more conventionally challenging, like chemistry or specialist mathematics, they're all subjects that most people will tend to get lower marks in because they are harder. So the subjects that I ended up choosing was stage 2 nutrition, mathematical methods, dance, biology, chemistry, and research projects. And this leads me into the next tip, which is to choose high scaling subjects. So honestly, I think there's 2 factors which should come into play when you're choosing your subjects. Number 1 is how they scale. Now, if your school doesn't do scaling, don't worry about this. And honestly, I'm kind of jealous because scaling kind of sucks sometimes. But, and again, please Google it because it is different for every country, every region, every school, how they scale it. But basically, generally how it works is like if you get a B and everyone else in your year level gets a C, then you've done really well and you get a really good score. Whereas if you got that same B and everyone else gets an A, then your B is comparatively low and so you'll get a low score. And typically harder and less creative subjects get scaled better. So for example, chemistry would get scaled better than art. And this is actually partially why I ended up getting my highest score for chemistry and my lowest scale score for dance, despite pouring my heart and soul into dance and honestly just kind of doing the minimum for chemistry. And yes, I did hurt, but I was kind of pleasantly surprised because I honestly thought I was failing chemistry at some point. And the second factor is if you actually like the subjects and you're good at them, because there is no point choosing a really high scaling subject if you actually hate the subject and you're not really going to try because you don't like the subject, because you're going to get a not very good mark anyway and you're just going to scale worse. So don't choose a subject just because it scales well if you don't enjoy it. Obviously, bonus points if you do enjoy it and it's high scaling, but if you really enjoy a subject and it doesn't scale too well, you can still do really well. It just is harder with scaling. It's really hard to explain. Please Google it because I don't fully understand it, but it's just something to keep in mind. So as you can see, I was a very hardworking student, but this did kind of eventually come to the detriment when I was in year 11 and I was studying 15 hours a day, completely burnt out and literally never satisfied with my results. I've told this story like a lot of times on my Instagram, but I remember one night I literally, I've been working the entire day. I worked in like 7-hour blocks. I had like 3 7-hour blocks. And then I was like hella tired and I got my laptop and my pillow and I put it down in the living room over there and I literally typed until I fell asleep. It was crazy. And I was literally like, at that point, I was like, I cannot continue to study like this. Like, this is not healthy. I'm so anxious. I cannot get on top of my workload. And it was not worth it. And I knew there had to be a different and better way to get the results I wanted without burning out. So when I started year 12, I said to myself, I made a decision. I wasn't going to focus on my grades. Yes, I was still going to work hard, but I wasn't going to measure my success by test scores. Instead, I was choosing to focus on understanding the content as well as I could and having a study-life balance that enabled me to look after my health and energy levels. So whilst I originally thought that this meant sacrificing any chance of getting good grades and getting valedictorian, I was actually very wrong. In fact, I actually cut down my studying time from 15 hours a day to around 4 hours a day, and my grades hardly changed. Now, there are a lot of reasons for this. I'm not going to go into all of them right here and now, but it did teach me a very important lesson which I'm going to share in this next tip. And this tip is to prioritize your energy levels over your output. You see, back when I was obsessed with getting perfect grades, I was giving up a lot of other things. I hardly ever slept, I hardly made proper meals myself, and I hardly went out to hang out with my friends. I saw all of these things as a distraction from achieving my goal. But surprise, surprise, I ended up chronically stressed and burnt out, which prevented me from hardly studying at all. Then when I made that switch at the start of year 12, everything changed. I was studying less but getting better grades. I was sleeping 8 hours a night. I was making sure that I had the time to eat proper meals and hang out with good quality people. And this nourishment is what gave me the energy to focus properly and perform at my best. It's all these study activities which really gave my brain the fuel and the energy to then perform at my best. Things like sport and socializing, they're all the things that give your brain a mental break and recharge your energy so that when you're sitting in class, you can actually focus and do your best. So no, being a top student doesn't and shouldn't mean giving up the rest of your life. Yes, you will have to make sacrifices from time to time. That is just part of it. But you are also in control of what those sacrifices are. Are they going to be your health, your happiness, and your friendships, or are they going to be your screen time, late nights out, or Netflix binges? No hate on any of these things, but I'm pretty sure you know which ones of those are going to give you more energy versus the ones that will drain your energy. And it's up to you what you choose to do. Now, all those things combined led me to eventually receiving my ATAR at the end of year 12. And whilst I was very much hoping for an ATAR of a 99, I ended up receiving an ATAR of 98.4, which technically puts me in the top 1.6% of the country. And yes, technically speaking, you would round that to being in the top 2%, and that is generally what I say, but for the sake of the algorithm and your guys' interest in this video, I say 1%. Don't hate on me for that, please. So whilst no, I didn't get a perfect score, and I also didn't get a valedictorian, although, girl, if you're watching this, I'm so proud of you. No hate on you. You worked incredibly hard, and I'm really proud of you. And you absolutely deserved it. But I'm so much more proud of the fact that I'm able to let go of the really obsessive studying habits that I have and kept me stuck for so long and actually live my life at the same time as achieving the results I did. So yes, there might have been a 1 or 2% lost over the span of a year from me not being super obsessed with my grades, but in comparison to all the life that I had gained, I have no regrets. My score enabled me to get into my first preference uni, which was Bachelor of Medical Science, which I'm now studying and I am really enjoying. And at uni, I'm continuing to get results that I'm really happy with and also living a life that I love. However, I know that this wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't gone through all those hard times in year 10 and 11, and I am still very grateful to my past self for getting through that and making it to the other side and living the life that she does now. And one final reminder is that you can try as hard as you want, like as hard as things can be. Sometimes with scaling, things are out of your control. You can put in 120 hours a week of study. Don't do that. But scaling would still not be in your favor sometimes. So even if you put in absolutely 110% effort, sometimes there are things that aren't in your control which can still influence your score. So I like to say that 90% of my results are due to my effort and 10% is due to extraneous variables. Like if I was sick before the exam, or if there was just a randomly difficult question on the exam, things like that can kind of trip you up sometimes and make you feel like, well, I worked really hard for this. Why is my score not reflecting that? Because sometimes there are things that happen in life that get in the way and can influence that. So please don't beat yourself up if you're trying really hard and your scores aren't perfect. That being said, if you're trying really hard and your scores aren't improving, then it might be time to look at the study methods that you're doing and other things around that, which, by the way, if you've made it to this point in the video, I can guarantee you that you are a very ambitious student. And you can probably relate to a lot of what I said. You want to be a top student, and let me tell you something, you can be. In fact, I've been building a platform specifically for you, and it's launching in 6 weeks. The Platform Academy is for ambitious students like you who want to get top grades but don't want to give up their life in the process. Because in this day and age, being a top student is way more than just study methods. It is a complete 360 of your identity, your habits, your routines, and so much more. And that is exactly what Academy teaches. So if you want to get an exclusive discount when we launch, I've put the waitlist link in the description in the bio, so you guys can join and you'll get a discount when we launch in 6 weeks time. Anyway, so those are my tips for today. I hope that you found this video/podcast helpful. If you did, again, please leave a rating. It means so much to me. And if you're on YouTube, please give this video a like and subscribe if you would like more self-development, productivity, study, all the things. And follow me on Instagram at @byariaemily for more motivational content and more self-development content. Anyways, see you in the next one. Bye guys.